Welcome to this explainer where we're going to dive into a truly fascinating geopolitical paradox surrounding one of the most physically stunning countries on Earth. We're talking about New Zealand. When you picture it, you probably imagine these sparkling lakes, majestic mountain ranges, and incredibly pristine streets. It honestly looks like a utopia. It's so perfect, you might even wonder if it's heavily photoshopped. But beneath that picturesque surface, there's a highly unusual phenomenon taking place.
So let's dive right into it. New Zealand isn't a failing state. It's not at war, it's not ruled by a dictatorship, and it's got great schools and a highly stable government. And yet, its own native-born citizens are leaving in absolute droves. And we aren't talking about tourists here. We're talking about the very people born and raised right there. It's left a lot of other wealthy, first-world nations completely baffled. I mean, why on earth would you flee paradise?
Act 1, the geography trap. To really understand this exodus, we've got to look at the map. New Zealand is incredibly isolated, sitting squarely out there in the South Pacific Ocean, literally thousands of kilometers away from major global trade routes. Now, consider this number for a second, 5.3 million. That's the entire population of the country. To put that into perspective, there are actually about 5 times as many sheep in New Zealand as there are people. For a modern, diverse economy to truly thrive, you generally need scale, a massive labor force, and a huge consumer market.
And just to show you the stark reality of that scale issue, the entire population of New Zealand is roughly equal to the population of just one city in neighboring Australia, Sydney. An incredibly small population inherently means a smaller consumer market, way fewer companies, and severely limited corporate opportunities. It's a massive foundational hurdle for any ambitious young professional dreaming of climbing the corporate ladder. Now, combine that tiny population with the geographic trap we just talked about, because New Zealand is so far away from major global shipping lanes, which, mostly run through the Northern Hemisphere, multinational companies find it so much cheaper and easier to just operate in Asia, Europe, or North America. And the result? A distinct lack of major global manufacturing and very, very few multinational corporate headquarters. Act 2, a two-pillar economy. So this extreme geographic isolation and the lack of global corporate investment kind of forces their financial system into a really unique corner. Instead of a highly diversified modern economy full of booming tech hubs, New Zealand relies almost entirely on just 2 main economic pillars. The first is agriculture. Because they're down in the Southern Hemisphere, they can harvest and export globally when the Northern Hemisphere is out of season. But here's the catch. Modern agriculture over there is highly automated. It relies heavily on AI and robotics. So while it brings massive wealth into the country, it doesn't exactly provide a wealth of high-level white-collar jobs for ambitious university grads.
And that brings us to the crucial second pillar, real estate. In New Zealand, housing has basically morphed from a basic human need for shelter into a primary financial tool for wealth generation. The entire economy practically revolves around buying, selling, and renting properties. When an economy leans this heavily on real estate, housing transforms into a super lucrative financial asset for global investors. And as you can guess, that creates a dangerous, suffocating trap for the local youth.
Now, here is where things get really fascinating. Despite having massive amounts of wide-open space, houses there remain wildly unaffordable. You can literally drive across New Zealand and see endless stretches of beautiful, empty land. In fact, nearly 80% of the land is entirely empty or undeveloped. Yet New Zealand consistently ranks as having some of the most unaffordable housing in the entire world. How is that even possible? Well, the answer lies in logistics. It's not about the land itself, it's about the sheer cost to actually build on it. Imagine trying to build your dream home, but almost every single piece of wood, every nail, and every pipe has to be imported across an ocean at a massive premium. Add in a severe shortage of construction labor, super high wages for the workers you can actually find, and incredibly strict building regulations, and the cost of a new home just skyrockets. This creates immense psychological stress for young citizens whose dream of homeownership feels, quite frankly, mathematically impossible.
So, faced with this incredibly low ceiling for corporate growth, a severe lack of multinational opportunities, and astronomical living costs that lock them out of owning a home, where do these ambitious, highly skilled young professionals actually escape to? Because they don't hate their country. They just want to achieve more, earn competitive salaries, and build a vibrant career. Act 3, the Australian advantage.
Just a quick hop across the Tasman Sea lies an easily accessible answer. It's a country with a shared language, pretty much an identical lifestyle, and a matching sports culture. Australia.
For a young New Zealander, moving there requires basically zero culture shock. And the contrast between the two is just stark. Australia is essentially a massive, scaled-up version of New Zealand. It's got deep capital markets, immense global resources, a huge corporate ladder, and vastly more universities. Australia offers the raw capital, the competitive salaries, and the limitless job markets that New Zealand simply doesn't have.
Act 4. The First World Brain Drain. Because of incredibly easy legal migration agreements between the two nations, New Zealanders can live and work in Australia with almost zero restrictions, and this fuels a bizarre, almost unbelievable cycle. First, native youth, the future doctors, engineers, and managers, move to Australia for better pay. Second, to prevent a total economic collapse and fill that resulting labor shortage, New Zealand imports highly skilled immigrants. But then comes step 3. Once these immigrants settle in and realize just how expensive New Zealand actually is, they often just use the country as a stepping stone to eventually jump to Australia themselves.
Which brings us to a really pressing question. If the ambitious local youth and the newly arrived skilled immigrants are continuously packing their bags and leaving for greener pastures across the sea, who is actually migrating into New Zealand long-term? Who is staying?
Well, instead of a dynamic young workforce, the permanent arrivals are a completely different demographic. We're talking about wealthy expats, affluent Australian retirees, and global investors. They're moving to these incredibly beautiful, postcard-perfect towns like Queenstown, Wanaka, and Auckland, but they aren't coming to build startups or climb the corporate ladder. They're coming to buy luxury holiday homes and enjoy a peaceful retirement. And ironically enough, their immense purchasing power just inflates the local real estate bubble even further, making it even harder for the locals to survive. Now, you might be thinking, why doesn't the government just fix it? Just raise salaries and build cheaper houses. But they can't just mandate higher salaries. Because of New Zealand's geographic constraints, attempting to artificially raise wages triggers this unsolvable cycle. Higher wages mean higher construction and imported goods costs. That makes living costs rise, real estate spikes even higher, and the resulting financial pressure forces even more youth to just pack up and migrate out.
If we look at a young professional's journey, we see an honestly heartbreaking timeline. A local graduates and immediately faces a housing market they can mathematically never afford. By year 3, feeling stuck beneath a really low corporate ceiling, they migrate to Australia to finally see some career growth. And by year 5, their physical place in their hometown is entirely replaced by foreign wealth, maybe a retiree buying their third investment property.
Act 5. A luxury retirement home.
So, what actually happens to a wealthy, first-world country when it constantly bleeds its ambitious youth, its future innovators, but actively attracts the global wealthy who are just winding down their careers? It completely alters the trajectory of the nation. It risks becoming an economy where the primary game is just trading real estate among an aging population. If a country loses the generation that builds and takes risks, leaving only those who passively invest, it risks transforming from a vibrant nation into an overpriced waiting room. And that leaves us with a pretty provocative and haunting question about the true cost of paradise. Can a country survive purely on its physical beauty and real estate, or will it ultimately wake up to find it's become nothing more than a luxury retirement home at the bottom of the world? It really makes you wonder what it truly takes to keep a modern utopia alive. I'd absolutely love to know what you think about this paradox. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and stay curious.